But here's this little gem called Mrs. McDowell, and look at her. She is a queen, and I remember this one is pretty wild. Like, when I've read it before, I'm like, oh my god, so much happens to Mrs. McDowell in her life before she even becomes Mrs. McDowell. So, here we go. I am also trying to figure out a way that I can have kind of like this. Whatever. I'll show you the pictures as I read it. Meep. Okay. On January 9th, 1875, Mr. and Mrs. Carnell gave birth to a wonderful little girl named Audrey. Mr. and Mrs. Carnell were very rich, so they gave Audrey everything she could possibly want. Audrey Carnell grew up in a humongous mansion. When she was 7 years old, Audrey and her parents went to get their pictures taken. But looking very sketched out. She's like, wait. And why did they wait until she was 7 years old to get their pictures taken? Anyway. Okay, at the time, Audrey did not like being a rich child. She did not like all the attention her parents and the people in the city gave her. After they had gotten their pictures taken, they had gone to a very fancy restaurant. After that, they went home and Audrey went to bed. That's their first adventure as a family. Mr. and Mrs. Carnell went to a very big party. On their way back on their carriage, the horse got scared of something and ran right into a forest. Audrey's parents had died. And that is the tragic death of Mr. and Mrs. Carnell. I don't know what she's doing with her leg, but she died. All right. When Audrey was informed about this accident, she cried. A few days later, she went to the funeral with her uncle. After the funeral, she ran away into the forest that her parents died in. That is her at the funeral, looking at her parents' caskets. It's a very dramatic picture. Audrey ran and ran until she found her parents' carriage. Her parents were still lying there, so she went and cuddled with them. She lied for a while and kissed both of them. Wow, she is laying in the forest with her dead parents. Wow, okay. And I don't know what it is, but like it seems like all of my lady characters always end up losing a shoe, and they are all wearing the same type of high heel shoe. 7 years passed, and Audrey left the forest. She walked out into the street, and a car hit her. 3 nuns on the sidewalk ran to the hospital and told the doctors about Audrey. Of course, the nuns did not know that little Miss Audrey Carnell got hit by that car. All the police and doctors ran out to the road and saw the little girl. "Wait a minute," said a police officer. "That's no little girl. That's Audrey Carnell." Audrey opened her eyes quickly to the sound of her name. That is her after her 7 years of living in the forest. So she's like 14 now. Okay. Audrey got out of the hospital the next week with a temporary cast on her arm. She was sent to an orphanage, but the orphanage didn't want her because they thought she was handicapped. Oh no, that's sad. The police tried every orphanage they could find, but none wanted her. "She can stay with me." Audrey looked up and saw a very fat and tall man who she hardly remembered. "By the way, I'm her uncle," said the man. The police said, "Okay," and Audrey's uncle grabbed her by the arm and pulled her into his car. I don't know if I trust that man. He's got a very curious looking mustache and looks like he's got a pipe. Audrey was forced to do work in rags and paid little amounts of money, even though her uncle was filthy, stinking rich. And that is her slaving away. Her uncle's making her do chores. While Audrey worked, her uncle would give his 3 daughters diamonds, pearls, rubies, sapphires, and anything they wanted. So she's got 3 stepsisters / cousins because that's her uncle. And she is like caressing his arm like, Daddy, give me diamonds, pearls, rubies, sapphires, and anything I want. Oh. Audrey's uncle's oldest daughter had to get ready for a ball. Dress me now, you little reject. Get up now or I'll kick you again, the oldest one shouted. She is not nice. You know, said Audrey. Know what? Asked Allison, the oldest. This dress makes your butt look really big, said Audrey. You just said the wrong thing, Miss Audrey Cornbell. Allison started kicking Audrey and smacking her with the umbrella. Goodbye, Cornbell, shouted Allison. Oh my god, what? She is not nice. Goodbye, Daddy, I love you. Tell Audrey to get up off the floor and start working. Allison walked out the door. Audrey, get up! Audrey's uncle ran into the dressing room. She was not there. He looked around and found a note. It read, Dear Uncle Harry, tell your daughters they're brats. Goodbye, Audrey Carnell. So that is the uncle who's not very happy. And then there's a letter from Audrey. Good for her. Audrey got on a train to New York. She changed her name to Cynthia Crowell. She also dyed her hair blonde temporarily. She did not know she was famous around the world. That's her getting on a train, and look at that conductor. He is on something, and she is like, yep, I'm a blonde now. When Audrey changed her name back and dyed her hair back, she was 25. She was riding in a taxicab on a new bridge when the taxi swerved over the edge and Audrey opened the door, jumped out, and held on to the broken railing. A stretch limo pulled up in front of her, and a man ran out and pulled Audrey to safety. Wow. That wasn't expected. There's the taxi falling off the bridge, and she's hanging there. Thank you so much. You saved me, said Audrey to the man. And that is where that story ends. So she technically, I'm pretty sure the guy who saves her is Mr. McDowell, and that's how she becomes Mrs. McDowell. But the world will never know. Maybe one day we'll get a part 2 of Mrs. McDowell.